Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Mark Gilbert.
Well, hello, lovely humans. What if your mind is more than just a collection of thoughts? What if it is the gateway to a whole new way of living? Welcome to Conversations in Mind. I'm Reverend Barb, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Mark Gilbert. And we seek weekly to demystify the study of new thought and dive into the science and soul of consciousness, of awareness, of moving forward in life. And so whether you're a longtime seeker or curious about the power of your own perspective, we're going to dive into mind. And today, we're going to have a little chat about the ego. What is it? How does it work? Do we want to transcend it? Do we want to just dematerialize it? What are we doing?
That's right.
So, hi, Mark.
Hi. Great to be back with you, and look forward to our always fun conversations. And this
Absolutely.
is a great topic. And one of the things that as we look at it is that, sometimes we feel like the ego is something we got to get rid of, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we need to strengthen the ego, and sometimes we need to get rid of it. So, maybe we need to...
We can transcend our egos.
Yeah.
But can we?
We'll be talking about that. I always remember hearing Wayne Dyer one year saying ego stands for edging God out. Was his little acronym.
I forgot about that one. Yeah. I heard that too. I've used that even, I think. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And now I would say I'm not totally in agreement with it. So, but we'll get there. But what is ego, I guess, is the question. Because, it's one of those things for me. We start off by looking at the fact that ego is a term we think we know. And a lot of times people put their own spin on it because, I think the terms maybe perhaps originated or became popular through the work of Freud and his id and ego and superego. And then Jung came along and had his whole meaning. And so there's a psychological and different ways in which people use the word ego, and philosophy uses it in different ways, and spirituality uses it in different ways. So maybe we ought to talk for a few minutes about how do we use and what do we understand? What is the ego to you, Barb, when you think about it?
Well, that's funny because when I came to look again at what it was we were going to talk about this week and what homework I needed to do around it, I was like, I realized we as in the collective we of the universe throw that word around a lot. Oh, that's just your ego getting in the way. That's just your ego talking. That's just your ego showing up as big-headed, whatever. I mean, it does get tossed around a lot, and I'm not sure does anyone really have a clear definition of it or a clear idea of what it means when they're throwing it around? I don't know. I did pull up the Science of Mind book glossary to kind of look at what Holmes said about it. So you want me to read? I can read that.
Let's hear it.
Paragraph. Yeah. The I am of the Bible, the Christ, the perfect idea of God. I don't know if I believe that. But in metaphysical terms, the ego refers to the real consciousness of man. In psychology, it carries a slight variation of interpretation, implying an organization or system of mental states. In this textbook, we frequently use it merely to convey the thought of the inner person, the real self. So is the ego our real self, or is the ego our false self that we present to the world?
And if you were putting that in your own words and what you think about it, what is ego?
All of the above, depending on frame of reference. I think at this point, I'm probably leaning into the idea that ego is the thing that we use to separate ourselves mentally from this idea of oneness. But I think ego is also a protection mechanism, so, within our body / mind states. So I'm not sure that I've landed completely on it, and I think context matters a lot in this. There's a numerous contexts that ego can be used in. But probably the most that I would lean into in this conversation is the things that I allow within myself to let me feel inferior or separate or like I am not whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
I like that. I agree. There's different ways, and it's based on the context that we're using the word. I'm glad we're saying this at the outset because I think we're going to probably coalesce towards some sort of usage of it from a new thought and science of mind kind of way. But for me specifically, I tend to always look at things from a standpoint, and I feel like a broken record saying this, but we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we live in multiple realms or dimensions or, aspects of being. And although, spirit embedded itself into us and we are returning back to spirit through the evolutionary process, but along the way, we are these humans. And as we are these humans, it behooves us in navigating through the human experience to have a sense of self, a sense of who I am. And so for me, a lot of the sense of what we commonly refer to as the ego is that sense of personal self. When I say I, and I refer to Mark, I am this, or I am feeling this, or I am wanting this, that the I that wants that is some sort of human being within the realm of this dimension that has a continuity to it. That I went to bed last night and I woke up today and I'm still Mark, I remember memories of my youth, and they are identified as this person, Mark. And Mark has visions and ideas for his future. So there's this body of myself that says Mark has this mind and this mind body that is him in this dimension. So that identification with this mind body has an ego. That's the ego, is that part where I identify with this sense of self and has that continuity of life, that has this historical story that I can tell about my life. So my ego sort of moves through that. It's also that part of me that feels like I can navigate, I can make changes, I can do physical things, I can lift up this, this cup and drink from it. I have agency. Mark is doing that. So who is it? Mark. And so that there is an I within us that we identify with. And I think the whole issue regarding ego is, which I do we identify with? Are we identifying with our human I, which is the ego that we call the ego, or we are identifying with our spiritual self, which transcends it? So I think that's where we're heading, is a sense of a balance between a transcendent identification with spirit and a greater I, or the I within the human sphere, and that's our ego. The thing is, and I'll cut to the chase on some of this, is that as we grow in the spiritual path and learn to transcend the human realm, it doesn't mean we don't live in the human realm.
Right.
And so we can know and taste and have taste of spirit and oneness and transcend our humanness and recognize our true spiritual self, the greater I. But we still then have to come back and live in this world of the human experience. And so we have to navigate in this world. And I think that ego, having a sense of ego that helps us to navigate through the world, is where we need to come out with. So it's a balancing act. Where do we balance with an ego that helps us navigate the world of form while not so overly identifying with it that we become egotistical and think this is all there is, and that we're forcing things to happen.
Oh, right. So on one hand, what I'm hearing you say is that there is a transcendent ego that connects in the spiritual realm, but it also sounds like the ego really belongs in the physical realm, not so much in the spiritual realm.
Well, I would tweak that a bit and say that in the transcendent realm there is no ego. Ego is a construct, or a mental construct that we use to define our sense of I-ness in the human realm.
Almost like time, right? Like in the spiritual realm, there really is no time, but we create this construct of time to manage our life.
Right.
Right.
As we're moving through
the construct of ego to manage our identity.
Yeah, it's something necessary for us to move through and navigate as a separate sense of individual in the human realm. But when we learn that we're more than that, when we learn our spiritual truth, then we recognize that we're all one, that the very nature of this human existence was created as an experiential playground or play, or lila, as the Buddhists say, for a human experience. It serves a purpose. And so the ego serves a purpose. But what happens is if we overly identify with that ego, it can limit us from transcending the ego and moving on our spiritual path. We can think, oh, I'm rich, I'm powerful, I'm famous. I can, I get so sensed and locked into being this human story of myself that we become so overly identified with our human sense of I-ness, ego, that it limits our ability to transcend it and see the unity of it all and how we're all one, we're all interconnected. When we can see things from that higher perspective, then we recognize the ego is just a tool we're using in the human realm, as is time, for that matter, which is a good thing, because there is no time. Eternity and beyond this realm, it's all the timeless and in the eternal now. We have to chunk things into parts for the human experience. We chunk it into time parts, and we chunk it into a sense of separate selves from one another.
And then sometimes there's the ego thing, and I don't know that we're going to touch on this that much, but the ego part thing that where we're calling it egotistical, which is really kind of full of yourself, right? In a bragging sort of way, I guess, for lack of a better word right now. But I don't think we're leaning on that very much today. But I'm aware of it. But
well, there is an aspect to that when you overly identify with your humanness, and you also don't meld into your sense of persona, your shadow aspects. When you bury things into the shadow, you can feel like there's a lack in your life, and you're trying to fill the lack, and you do it through egotistical means. So yes, you can have a sense of personal self that so identifies with your person as being the one who makes things happen, that has a sense of winning over others, if you're in that win-loss mentality. If you overly identify with your ego and your sense of personal human self, then that can lead to sort of shadow aspects coming out. And yeah, I think something we perhaps can touch on. Or
okay.
just
or yeah, whatever. So where does this idea of ego, do you think, actually serve our spiritual growth?
Where does it serve our spiritual growth? Well,
Yeah, how do you think it serves our spiritual growth? To have a developed sense of ego, or which is really a developed sense of self, but separate from and connected to all at the same time. This feels like a big circular conversation. Right now.
no, but it gets back to the same thing I was touching on a moment ago. Spirit, or the level of oneness, or the transcendent nature, embedded its characteristics into this whole total world of form. We're moving through a play of form where we are in what we call the relational world. We're in relation to one another, and part of being in relation to one another, it's about the experience of the relationships, especially the moments of time where we're experiencing interactions, such as this interaction right now, is for the benefit or the bliss of the divine, for God. So God can, in a sense, forget that it's all one and move through an experience of separation for the experience itself. And so if we take it even a step lower, spirit embedded itself into all of the form, and we went through a physical evolutionary arc where there was a buildup of, and consciousness, as we've talked about in prior episodes, mind is in everything. So mind evolves, the forms evolve, and we get to a level where we are at this human level where we can think about thinking. And so the ego becomes a tool in this human realm where we think about thoughts. And we need to have some way to think about the sense that we have a thought that says, well, who am I? I'm this sense of a person. I was born into this family. I have this history, this story. I believe that this is right and this is wrong. This is what I want for my life. This is where I'm going. This is where I've had success. This is where I've had failures. I have this entire story. The ego is some aspect where I identify with this separate sense of self in this material world where we're in relationship with one another. So everybody you meet has an ego. has an ego that is that sense of personal self that they're using in relationship with other egos and personal senses of self in this human realm. But as we grow and evolve beyond this realm, we start realizing that that's not the end of the story. And so the people who overly identify with the ego get so locked into their human sense of I. And we know many people like this. There's many people in the public sphere this day who so overly identify with their sense of self, they think that's who they are ultimately. At the spiritual nature, and what mystics have been telling us for so many centuries, is that we transcend that we really, our ultimate truth is beyond this world of form. This is a temporary state that we're moving for. So the ego is simply a consciousness construct that is created for us to believe and think that we're separate from others so we can be in relationship with one another. But we can overly identify the ego. And, for those who are interested in what I was just going through, there's a beautiful book. Ken Wilber, one of his first books many years ago, was called No Boundaries. And I'm going to take just a couple of minutes. And
I haven't read that one, so please, yeah.
Yeah. But what he says is we all start in spirit, just like I was talking about. We start in the sense of oneness or the transcendent nature or the absolute. But for spirit to step down into form and to create this playground of us moving about where we're thinking we're separate, there has to be levels of forgetting who we are as we step down. And the first step, which many philosophers have identified, is the very nature of thinking involves a subject and an object. In the very beginning, step down out of spirit was the creation of a subjective internal awareness where we are internally aware of an object that is separate from us. And so this is the basic level of philosophical division, is objects in the world that we see as separate, breaking things into objects out there perceived by a subjective awareness in here. And this goes down to the molecular level where a molecule has some sort of internal awareness and interacts with a relationship with an outer awareness. So subject-object awareness goes all the way down to the lowest physical forms, but it moves up to where we're aware of it. We're aware that we're a subject. We're aware that we have a subjective interior that can think about and is aware that we're perceiving an external. It happens in our dogs and animals and cats and plants and things. They all have an internal awareness and an external awareness at their own level of being, but we have a human level of it. But the first step down of his book is creating subject-object difference. And then in humans, that delineation, and the very first part of that is this beginning where we identify with the subjective, our internal awareness. When we break that down and take it another level, we break it into the ego, which is our internal mind that perceives our bodies as separate from us. So now we've divided ourselves even further. Not only are we the subjective looking at objects, we've created our body as an object along the way. And then we have an internal awareness. So that internal awareness is our ego. And we've separated ourselves even further from our bodies, our physical bodies that we look at as an object. And we take it even further down, and we break our ego up into the persona we show the world. So even our egos have a persona and they have a shadow. And the shadow is that part that we deny and don't show the world, or it comes out in inappropriate ways, or we try to stuff it down and bury it. So that sort of egotistical stuff you were talking about is part of this. So, and I'm doing it, probably doing injustice to Wilbur's book, but it's a beautiful little book from 30, 40 years ago. And it basically says we're breaking down out of oneness into subjective object, ego body, persona, shadow. And our whole process is to move back to wholeness, to marry our shadow with our persona, return seeing our bodies as part of our egos and meld that oneness, and then to remeld the oneness of the subjective awareness with the objects that we perceive. And as we move back up, we're returning to spirit and knowing oneness.
So I keep getting this visual of babies actually when they start to differentiate from,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a step, like it's a very clear step in the development of a child is when they start to recognize that they're separate from their mother / the other people around them. It's too bad we have to do that. I mean, it's the only way we can function, right? But it is also, it's, I also, kind of get this visual of, when babies first realize that they have a body and it's like, oh, these are my toes, so so it really does actually start all the way back there.
Yeah, you can look at the developmental stages of a baby going through the very fact that they have to develop that subject-object difference.
Yes, totally.
Start identifying with they start creating the ego. They start identifying, studies have shown that little young children they can't tell the difference, but that you and I are not different. And I won't go into the studies, but there's ways in which they can identify that the child can't see that what you're thinking and what I'm thinking are different. They think they're the same, but over time we start recognizing, oh, you're different from me and you've got a different internal awareness than me. And that's when we start creating more of that egoic sense that my internal awareness is different from yours. You can't tell what I'm thinking. And then over time, we also start realizing that some of our internal awareness we want to hide from ourselves. So we start dividing our internal awareness up into our shadow aspects. And so as we look at the development path of a human from an infant up through the stages of full maturity as an adult, 18, 20, whatever, it's a path of
35.
letting go.
What do you mean 18 or 20?
Yeah, exactly. But one thing, Barb, is it's all the human. Why do we have to go through? Why can't we go back to be like a baby? And part of it is we have to go through the journey. It's part of it. We have to learn the lessons. Yeah. It's the hero's journey, just like in what we're talking about of spirit going into form so it can forget itself and go through the journey and learn and have the experience. And we're doing it at the individualized level.
Well, and if you believe in soul development, which and that we return to various life experiences for soul development, then this is part of it, and it has to happen every single time so that we can develop whatever it is that we're hoping our soul develops, which at some point is, I think, the reconnection at the level where we get to vibrate off at some point,
Yeah. That's another topic, isn't it?
Should I write that down for next week? Death. We can talk about death. No. We can talk about the death of the ego, which I don't think is real. I don't think it doesn't ever leave us. People are like, oh, I killed my ego or I transcended my ego. I'm like, no, actually, I think that we bring it into balance as we mature spiritually. We bring it into balance. We tone down the separation and we tone down the part of ourselves, not tone it down, but the part of ourselves that wants to be materially successful settles down a little bit, hopefully, and allows us the space to become more spiritually connected. And maybe this is my ego deciding what's important for everyone, but but I think that's part of it. You just start to figure out at some point, if you are maturing, and we know people who are not, but if you are maturing, that there is a place where you start to recognize that the things that really matter are the things that are not of the ego.
Yeah.
Does that ring for you?
It rings perfectly, and it gets into that whole story about, well, are we really transcending, or are we denying and killing the ego, or how do we if we're not, how do we bring this balance about? But maybe this would be a good segue to our commercial.
Oh yeah, wow.
and
Yes,
remind
Lord.
folks that you're watching the New Thought Media Network, and this program comes to you through the good graces of the New Thought Media Network, and we would encourage you to support them. We're going to show you a commercial with a QR code, so get your camera out. But we'd also like to remind you that we love your feedback, and so no matter how you're watching this particular program or listening to it on the many people who are listening to this via their audio podcast, that we encourage you to drop us a comment, drop us a line, let us know what you like, what you want to react to, what topics you'd like us to cover. We always enjoy hearing your comments as to any kind of reaction to the words that you're hearing here, and also giving us ideas for things you'd like us to discuss. We know and hope that it finds our conversations beneficial. But by supporting the New Thought Media Network, it allows us to continue doing these broadcasts through their means, and also it helps support them so they can continue doing the good work and all the programs that they bring. So here comes the commercial.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
Thank you for that. And, again, we love your comments. So do you think that the ego is something that we want to heal, or we want to transcend and move? And by, I guess the word transcend to me in this particular case sort of feels like move away from, turn away from, because it's going to be there. Like transcending makes it sound like it disappears, and I don't think that's.
To borrow a popular phrase from Ken Wilber, he likes to use the word transcend and include. And he says that all of the evolutionary process is that. And I think the so-called healing of the ego is part of our evolutionary process. We can be stuck at the human level and never heal our ego. And we can get, absorbed into identifying with ourselves so strongly that we go for power and fame and money and whatever it is that is on this human existence is so mesmerizing to somebody that they can get anchored in it and not be able to let go of it. And that can, in a way, stifle them on their ultimate journey. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong here. But we are saying that ultimately there is a call in the spiritual realm for us to transcend the human realm. And so for a person who gets stuck in their egos and doesn't move on, that's where they are. And I think, as we said in prior programs, if once they feel the right impetus and their life gives them the right push to move on, then they'll grow and transcend it. But people can get stuck at this level. Let's just acknowledge that. And I think that's when Wayne Dyer used ego as edging God out, he was trying to point to the fact that when we forget about God and get so immersed in the human story, in our human existence, that we think that's all it is, that this sense of I is me as this human being is all that I can identify with. And I'm edging God out and I'm forgetting that transcendent nature. But on the flip side, we can get we can be a monk in the hills and forget about our bodies and, live in a state of total transcendence and forget that we're living in the world of form. And is that really doing what Spirit's desire is for us? Is it not also to live in this relational world and have the experience for the bliss of the divine? So there ultimately it's sort of like a bell-shaped curve. There's always going to be people who are stuck in human ego and people who want to stuck in transcendence and can't move to the middle. But most people, they really should be moving into, it should is not the right word, but you know what I mean. There is a call for us to transcend the human story, to identify our truth and oneness, and then come back and live in this world and enjoy this world and the gifts of this world, because it really is a gift. And in spite of all the stuff that's going on in the world, how can we bring our awareness and the love and the bliss that we're feeling back into this and assist others on their journey as well?
Well, and I want to say too, when we talk about things like this with the material world, I think that there are more and more people who actually have some fame and wealth and have created a life that they love that brings those things in, but that is not their focus. So it does not mean doing this work, becoming more spiritual, does not mean taking a vow of poverty and living on the edge. That's not required. But it's interesting because right now there's like such a, like in politics, there's this what feels to me like huge amount of materialistic ego, billionaire class thing going on. That's where my mind is the mind that rules all things, right?
Right.
But there's also a lot of people who are wealthy, well off, all those things, like in entertainment, for instance, who are really doing spiritual work out loud in many ways, and trying to live in in some sort of a balance of, yes, I have this material life, but I'm also putting out a message of love and kindness, and as I read some of their reflections on the work that they're doing these days, like there is a lot of connection with something greater than themselves in that group of people going on that doesn't feel as egotistical as it used to. Does that make sense?
No, totally. The way I look at it, Barb, is that it's like the Bible quote, "The love of money is the root of all evil." It's not saying money is the root of all evil.
Right.
It says the love of money.
Right.
And so what we're seeing, it gets back to what's the intention. If your intention is the goodness to take your inner gifts that you've been given in this incarnation and bring them to the planet for joy and for the fullness of the expression, and you sense the oneness, and you have a call to uplift and serve the planet through your special gifts and talents, and it gives you remuneration, so be it. If you develop wealth, but then if your ego gets attached to the money over the service and the expression of the gifts,
yes,
that's when you get out of balance. And I think what we're seeing now, and I agree with you, there are many very rich people who have very good intentions and very good hearts and are doing very good work on the world. Yeah. And so what it gets to, and sometimes it's hard to tell, well, which billionaire is good and which billionaire is bad, we're using those relative terms, but it's really because we're trying to understand the intentions behind people. And sometimes we overlay our own consciousness onto other people's stories. We bring our story to what we say about what we see other people. Oh, is Bill Gates doing good, or is Elon Musk doing good, or what about so and so? And we're trying to determine their intentions. But my take on that is that we can't control other people. Well, all we control is our own.
Oh, come on.
And our own beliefs. All we can do is look at it and say, what is mine to do and be on this planet? And yes, I do feel and agree with you that there are it does feel like we're going through a time when we're out of balance, and there seems to be overly attachment to material form through power, through money, through fame, and control. And that is for personal gain. Power can be used for good, and power can be for the greatest good, or power can be used for personal good. And if it gets out of whack, where somebody is taking power and using it only for their personal gain and grandizement, then I think they're out of whack.
Well, and it seems like when you get on that track, when we're viewing people who have been on that track, like the what brings you satisfaction seems to get further and further away, and more extreme in a lot of behavior. So, I think, I think the universe always seeks balance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the planet, the Earth, from the planet to the universe, there is always a seeking of balance of some sort. And so I have to believe that those things are going to come back into balance in some way. They'll need to. Yeah,
we've said in prior episodes, life is like a pendulum or a spiral, and we're swinging, but whenever we swing one way, we have to swing into the other. It's like when people have asked me, what do I think about what's going on in the world? I say, well, for the short run, it may be out of whack and there's going to be some, pain and struggle, but in the long run, things will be okay. And I think that we can even sense, even in the current culture, things are out of whack in terms of people's love of money and fame and power.
Oh, yeah.
And there will be a reckoning where the pendulum will swing back. How that will look like and what it will look like, I don't know. But I'm optimistic that the universe has always self-corrected. When we move too far to one way, it says, oh, okay, you've explored the boundaries of that aspect of human experience. Let's go explore the other way, and we can get out of whack in either direction. And there's always a movement. We swing back and forth, but we're always upward, which is why I think the spiral resonates with us, because we go that way and we go back the other way, but we're always moving upward. We're moving upward. And that doesn't mean sometimes we don't take 2 steps back on the game board of life, but eventually we will overcome those steps and move forward.
Well, what I continue to say about the current situation and how life looks right now is that there were a lot of things that were not in balance that a lot of us did not realize were not in balance, and in terms of how other groups of marginalized groups of people are treated, and that has to correct. And I think that's part of what's happening now is like the full falling away of false belief of separation and power overness,
right,
so that we can create a society that is actually power balanced and cares for itself and each other. The only way we're going to get there is for people to begin to care about everyone else.
Yeah, there's a certain social psychologists talk to the fact that we move up a moral development line.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, it moves from being, egocentric, only caring about yourself, to ethnocentric, where you care about your group, and that can be your religion, it can be your race, your country, your whatever. Yeah. You have your in group and your out group, but we eventually move to a state of world-centric and cosmos-centric, where we not only can identify with and see our unity with other people, but ultimately with the universe itself. And so our moral care and concern stops wherever we are on this moral line of development. What do you care about? If I only care about me, then anything that's not me, I don't give a damn about.
Right. Which is total egocentric behavior.
Total egocentric behavior, yeah. But if we can expand to even caring about a small group of other people, my in group, and I've got an in group and an out group, that's egocentric. And many people stop at that level. But there are higher levels of being. And the further you move up the spiritual path, the more you become aware of the interplay of life, then you can start seeing, and you start caring about not only every other person, no matter what their race, religion, sexual orientation, et cetera, is. You just care about them because of the nature of their existence. And then ultimately to the planet and the cosmos. You care about the planet and the very state of being. You're caring about this entire realm, this entire dimension we're moving through.
Yeah. Yeah. Parking spaces for everyone.
Exactly.
The simplified version is parking spaces for everyone.
Yeah. And the higher version is that we are able to support each other in transporting each other. So we don't always need so many damn parking places.
Yes. There we go. There we go. And all of that, if we come back to our topic for the week, all of that requires a certain amount of, I don't know if it's stripping away or learning or learning to do without so much ego and so much focus on our own belly buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The real trick, Barb, is that, we have to come back and live in the material world and navigate as this individual. Mm-hmm. And we still have, so we have to have an ego for this sense of relationship with other people and how we're navigating. But then the trick is not to get so re-identified with your form that you forget about your unity with those other expressions that you are relating with. It's like I think I've said before, we can have a perspective. I can have a perspective of Mark. I can put myself for a moment in your shoes and say, oh, Barb's probably thinking about this. And I can look out at the world and say, oh, maybe, famous people and people in the news are acting this way because of their stories. And I can put myself in their shoes. But can I step outside the entire sphere and look down on it and say, can I look at how all the pieces are playing? And that's truly what we're called to do on the spiritual path, is to transcend the sense of being a separate individual, understanding the perspectives of others, understanding the perspective of the all. And by that, as much as we can, and it's difficult, but one of the best spiritual practices is really to try to identify with other people and what their lives are like.
Yeah. For sure. And it's funny because, we start talking about becoming more spiritually aware and connected, and we forget that means being more spiritually aware and connected with other humans as well. It's
right.
not just about being connected to spirit, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. You're connected with something larger. Something larger includes all the people. Right. So
yeah, and it's real easy to feel this sense of transcendent nature and feel, oh God, how spiritual I am. And then you come back and you
have my own chair in my own house and I have coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've joked about the fact that you take that transcendent feeling back and drive in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you're cursing them,
right.
And it's not to say not to have healthy boundaries when people are bumping into you and doing wrong to you. But it's to carry an awareness of your connection to everyone and to bless people and want the best for other people and not do you see yourself in competition with others, or do you see yourself in a unity of cooperation with others?
Right. And that's the key. Like even back Wallace Wattles talks about that like a lot, that we will not move until we move out of competition and into creativity and connection.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have much more to add to this today.
Well, this has been fun.
Thank you for. Yeah, I love that your work with Ken Wilber, and that you remember all of it is really lovely.
Some days.
Well done. Thank you. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, do you have anything you want to close with? Because I'm pretty.
No, I guess just as a closing, I guess what I'm called to say is remember that your ego is necessary for navigating the human realm, but you're called to a spiritual realm. And as you remember and then see the higher perspective of the interrelationship of everybody, to keep that awareness with you as you're interacting with others. Keep your eyes on the greater vision of where we are, and don't lose yourself back into the story of the humanness and our separation that we feel in this world.
Yeah.
Always stay focused on the fact of our unity, and that will help you through the challenges that are in front of you sometimes.
And that will help all of us through all the challenges if we're all doing that together. So thank you. Beautiful thought.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being with us.